My mission in life at this point in time is to start adding PHP code to my project in order for me to implement the login and registration process. And I will start by going to the last PHP project I worked on, which is No Framework, and then copying anything that's useful from that project so that I have some kind of PHP scaffolding upon which I can grow my new project Underdog.zone. I got No Framework on the left and Underdog Zone on the right. The first thing I should look at is index.php. Over here and over here. So that's what I'll be doing. Both index pages start with PHP code. The page I'm copying from, the first useful piece of PHP is this line right here. So I'm gonna take that and put it in my current project. Copy. Okay, let's go over here. See up there. Paste. Require includes Initialize Dot Php. So what I gotta do right now, since I've included Initialize Dot Php, is I need to go and create an Initialize Dot Php and have in it anything that would be useful for this project. So this is my Initialize Dot Php, and this paragraph describes what Initialize Dot Php is for. The paragraph says, here we define the core paths, define them as absolute paths in order to make sure that the require command works as expected. However, the first thing we're going to do in this Initialize.php will not be to define an absolute path. The first thing will be, and I'll read the paragraph, to load config.php, and config.php is the only file which differs from one installation to another. That is why it's listed in the .gitignore. Also, this require uses a relative path. Therefore, config.php and initialize.php must live in the same directory. And then I issued the command require config.php. So now what I need to do next is build the config.php for this project. I changed the wording to make it a little bit more nice. You can pause the movie and read it. However, I'm going to be closing this file right now, since now we're going to move on to editing config.php. I added content to config.php and created that file. I don't want to show it because it has some confidential information. So besides creating it in my development environment, which is where this is, I also created it on the production server. Config.php is a file which doesn't travel with the project when I use the repository to move the project around. So it has to be created manually in every installation of Underdog.zone. I've heavily commented the contents of config.php, so there's no need for me to provide instructions right here in this video. So right now I'm going to move back and start working on initialize.php. That's actually part of the repository for the project. So in initialize.php, after including config.php, the next thing we did is, first we have a comment saying that proj root is a constant defined in config.php. The next thing we did is we defined the directory separator, and then we defined 4 constants for paths: lib path, logs path, web directory, and vendor directory. After that, we include functions.php, and I'm going to be adding that next to underdog.zone. Here we're looking in the file called functions.php. This is the copy which I inserted into the includes folder of underdog.zone. And I've decided to remove this function, which is called strip zeros, because it was not even used in the No Framework project, and it relies on the fact that you're going to mark the string with an asterisk before the zero. Okay, and so I'm just going to get rid of this. I've changed my mind. I want to keep this function because I think it will come in handy, because I've also decided to keep these other functions for logging. You know, let me show you the old project, No Framework, right there. It had a logs directory with a file called log text. As you can see, this is logging activity. So login super user logged in. So I want to have something just like this in Underdog Zone to record actions. And these other functions which record actions can record any action. And since the action may have a date in it, let's open that again. We are recording dates here. Okay, but I think this is coming from somewhere else. Anyways, we may need to display the dates in the output, and we may not want to have deleting zeros. Okay, so this function could come in handy. So this function over here, I'm going to keep this and any other function which does some logging. So besides having the function log action, which will log an action to a file defined by this right here, we also have a useful function called redirect to, which will redirect the browser of the user. And we have a function called output message, which basically takes a string message and puts it into HTML. And then we have some more here. Here we have a function called load main class, which is an autoloader. I don't remember how, auto-loading works, so I'm just going to leave this function in here until I figure it out. So apparently this is a more modern auto-loading mechanism called SPL autoloader. That's why this one is commented out. So I'm just going to leave all this in here until I figure out how auto-loading is going to be working in my project. Now we're looking at this. This function over here has something to do with the layout of the page, and I'm just going to delete it because I'm using Bootstrap. For date to text, this function takes a string and it returns a date time string with using this format. Actually, what this function does is it takes a string, and this string could be any English language description of a date. And then it converts that string into a Unix time date, kind of like a Unix timestamp. And then it uses this strftime function to convert that Unix timestamp into a date that has this format. Now, the only thing I'm not sure about is if there are any time zone issues while doing this whole process over here. Size as text simply takes a size in bytes and returns a more user-friendly equivalent. In other words, if it's like 800 bytes, it'll say 800 and then the word bytes. If it's like 2000 bytes, it'll probably say, it'll round it off and then say 2 kilobytes, and so forth. And that's it for my functions.php file. And also, that will be the end of this video.